Do you want to be great at solving problems? Do you want to make better decisions? Of course you do. This audiobook will teach you how to overcome cognitive biases and fallacies in your thinking so that you can think more clearly in your everyday life. Stimulate your mind and develop better critical thinking skills and make everyday life easier. Hello, this is Harrison Walton, and you are listening to Critical Thinking. Think in mental models to develop effective decision-making and problem-solving skills. Overcome cognitive biases and fallacies in systems to think clearly in your everyday life. Provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now let us begin. Isn't it interesting to learn that our brains function the same way as a computer? In fact, your brain, which actually weighs 3 pounds in mass, is a natural supercomputer that serves as the control center of your entire body. It is critical to the functioning of all parts of your body, just as it is involved in everything you do in your life. Part of your composition that determines how your thoughts flow, how you direct your actions, and how you behave socially. The brain regulates what kind of person you become, controlling your thoughts, your politeness, your degree of rudeness, how you handle dangerous situations, and even how you behave with strangers, colleagues, family, and friends. It is correct to say that your mind is in charge of your emotional well-being. The brain also influences how you relate to people. Essentially, what you have to understand is that your cerebral matter is active in virtually everything you are involved in throughout your life. That's why you need to nurture it, feed it, exercise it, and understand how it works if you want to succeed in polishing your creative thinking skills. Needless to say, only when you are able to manage critical thinking are you in a position to solve problems and handle difficult situations in a way that makes things better for you and those you are trying to help. Your brain is actually more complex than a computer. For example, it has 100 billion nerve cells, and all of these nerve endings have connections to many other cells. You may find this hard to believe, but that same small piece of matter inside your head has more connections within it than the number of stars in the universe. Utilizing all of these physical connections, you can become the best possible you in your workplace, in relationships, and recreation, and in all the other areas of your life when you put effort into optimizing your brain function. When it comes to exercise, the brain needs as much training as the physical body, so some people choose to meditate, practice yoga, eat healthy foods, and do other things to improve the health of the brain. Often, the smoothness of brain functionality can tell you how your life is doing, because it is that brain that houses the computer that runs your day-to-day existence. Regardless of your age, the fact is that your brain needs to be exercised, and when you train it regularly, the positive effect is manifested in your life. In short, when you want your brain to continue to be able to solve problems, even the most difficult ones, you have to take care of it, both in what you feed it and how regularly you exercise it. This book is about critical thinking, and that includes intelligent strategies and logical thinking. It also discusses the best decision-making skills you need to acquire. Everything discussed in the book requires very high-level reasoning, which means that your brain must, by necessity, be in excellent shape. It is for this reason that this book explains what you need to do to exercise your brain and what you need to do to become a logical thinker. You will also learn from this book the best techniques to sharpen your decision-making skills. Chapter 1. Understanding Critical Thinking. The term critical thinking has become ubiquitous, and it would be difficult to find someone who hasn't come across it in some form, whether in other books or on the internet. But what exactly does it imply, and why is it considered a constructive development? If so, is it a positive development, or is it simply a means of adding more stress to an already overburdened mind? As you progress through the book, you will find the answers to these and many other questions about critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Critical thinking does not necessarily imply that one is criticizing, contrary to popular belief, although it is possible that it can be done much more effectively after engaging in critical thinking. Taking in information and contributions from a variety of sources, analyzing them, and reflecting on them before attempting to form an opinion is what the term itself refers to. It is the process by which thoughts and arguments are rationally entertained rather than being rushed into forming an opinion and passing judgment on something. Critical thinking skills are required regardless of what others instruct you to do. because this is how you come to truly form your own beliefs and convictions, rather than simply repeating the beliefs and convictions of others. Hatred, bigotry, fanaticism, xenophobia, anger, and other issues that plague our society today would simply vanish if people were taught to think for themselves, as opposed to following the herd. A person is not born racist or homophobic. Rather, he inherits those notions from the societies in which he lives and never pauses to consider the implications of his actions. Why do you need critical thinking? When it comes to everything, why is it so important to take an analytical approach, to consider and think carefully about the claims and arguments that are heard on a daily basis, especially in this day and age of the internet? Developing your own set of beliefs. Let's face it, we're all born into a particular belief system, whether religious, social, or otherwise. Critical thinking assists you in challenging each and every one of those doctrines and determining for yourself whether or not they are truly something you have to follow or believe in. There is nothing wrong with adhering to a particular religion or becoming an atheist. It is those who follow either path without question, simply because they have been told that this is the right path to take, who are far too often a source of danger. A religious fanatic or a racist will not engage in critical thinking. They are deluded individuals who never take the time to reason for themselves. When you think critically about things, you will never fall into one of those classifications. Your hatred for another person will never be motivated by a person's sexual orientation, race, creed, religion, or any other inconsequential characteristic. You will begin to notice things that help you feel more connected to others rather than things that distance you from them. A better understanding of things. Critical thinking allows you to gain a more comprehensive understanding of a variety of topics. Acquiring knowledge is never really about cramming as much information as possible into your head. Anyone with a good memory is capable of doing so. But what good is knowledge if you don't take the time to really think about it and analyze it? Acquiring knowledge entails analyzing the information you receive, identifying correlations and/or causality, and deducing the consequences of a particular piece of information or argument, among other things. When you do, this will assist you in putting your newfound knowledge to good use, and you will be able to use it to solve problems, as well as answer larger and more important questions. You will discover that all of the great scientists and thinkers of our time in previous eras lived by a code that required them to critically question everything they did. This allowed them to gain a significantly better understanding of our universe by constructing and deconstructing information, statements, and hypotheses that they came across in their travels around the world, as well as comprehending the logical connection between ideas and how everything is interconnected. Critical thinking allows us to determine how science is established and the foundation on which it then operates. The rationality of forming an argument. We live in an era in which people disagree about everything. Some even argue to make a living, which is unfortunate. It is very easy to come across as uninformed or foolish, which is why critical thinking skills are sorely lacking in today's society. Critical thinking will help you understand a very important point that could have a profound impact on your life. It is not a question of being right or wrong, or of making judgments about others, except in cases where it is simple enough to make such discernments, known as a case of black and white. As soon as you fully grasp the concept that you do not need to make a snap decision on every issue, but instead must analyze and comprehend each claim from every angle, you will notice that your reactions will begin to change and become more rational. You can then form an argument from a logical point of view that is based on being informed and reasonable rather than being impulsive should the situation call for it. Instead of taking the "I am right, you are wrong" approach, you will be able to elaborate on your statements and provide solid arguments for why you do not agree with them. When it comes to critical thinking, this line of thinking is typically ineffective and does not aid or contribute to any positive change. This brings us to a very important application of critical thinking: problem solving. As we will discuss in greater depth later in the book, one of the primary reasons many people struggle with problem solving is that they rarely address the issue at hand in a critical way. Becoming a better person. Simply put, critical thinking will help you become a better person. You will develop more empathy, and begin to realize that you don't have to be right all the time. Maybe the other person is correct sometimes. Perhaps your worldview is not the only valid one, and there might be a different reality outside the confines of the box you are in. You begin to empathize with others, and you see other perspectives for what they really are, simply viewpoints of people who don't share your beliefs, not enemies or people you should hate for being different. Critical thinking helps you to see beyond cultural norms and to see people for who they are, rather than who they tell you they are. This, and the fact that you shed all hatred for those who are simply different, helps you to be a better person and a stronger leader, which brings us to the next point: improving as a leader. As you listen to this, you may ask yourself, how does critical thinking assist me? Well, it will help you to be a better leader and manager. The empathy you gain from analyzing and thinking about other people's points of view means you will be able to show those ideas the respect and recognition they deserve. It also means you will be better equipped to make decisions because you understand that every problem must be considered from all angles. When a team member tells you about a problem they are facing, you won't get defensive and start undermining their problem. Instead, you will listen and think about it, and you may find they have a very valid complaint. If one of your team members suggests an idea to you and you think critically about it, your ego will never get in the way. If it is a really good idea, you will accept it and push your people forward. You will clearly see that it is good for business, and what is good for business is good for you. Critical thinking will also help you communicate better, as every point or statement you make will be backed by evidence and solid reasoning rather than emotion. It will help you reach your subordinates and deliver your messages in a comprehensive and clear manner. Business and science. What do these two disciplines have in common? Both are largely based on critical thinking, and critical thinking has played and will play an important role in their evolution. When you begin to consider problems from all angles and think about your possible options and solutions, you will become a better problem solver, which is a necessity for any professional today. Critical thinking also promotes creativity because that is what is needed to find a solution to a difficult problem, one you have considered from all angles. You will not settle for an ordinary answer, as you will continue to analyze your solution and find different ways to improve it. As for science, it goes without saying that all scientific theories and experimentation are based on critical thinking. Scientists question everything, and their theories and hypotheses are not based only on their intellectual capabilities, but rather on how they can build their reasoning and connect those ideas. Making sense of the world. All of the above aside, we need critical thinking to make sense of the world, especially in one as polarized as ours is today. You are constantly being told what is right and wrong, and who are the bad people you should hate. It can be a very slippery slope to take, believing everything you hear as truth without subjecting the statements to reason and critical thinking. Critical thinking is the way you will be able to determine which statements are correct and which are false, biased, and probably serving a particular agenda. You keep hearing the term false news, but is it false news? And if so, why is that? This is where critical thinking comes in. It's your way of knowing what makes sense and what doesn't, and most importantly, how you should act on it. Some philosophers say there are no absolute truths, but if there were, critical thinking is how you would find them. Does critical thinking go against personal beliefs and feelings? No, it does not. Critical thinking simply means the arguments formed and the approach to problem solving are not going to be based on faith, personal beliefs, or gut feelings, but on a sensible and rational consideration of the facts presented and the information available. If you want to call a person an idiot, instead of showing why they are wrong, at least do it while giving a reason they are not intelligent. Although it doesn't help your case if you start with the insults. How to make your critical thinking process more structured. Make a list of the different ideas in the material you're evaluating. Examine how those concepts relate to one another or contrast with one another. Evaluate the relevance and importance of each idea. Identify the various arguments in the material you have, and then evaluate how much weight each one carries. Make arguments that show how much you agree with the reasons given, as well as how much you disagree with any of the ideas or arguments. Make a mental note of any inconsistencies you find in the arguments. If you find any obvious inaccuracies, extract them so that they are recognized as such. Propose a solution to any flaws you discover. Gather your personal values during your analysis so that they can be reflected in the arguments you create to counter those with whom you disagree. Can you see now that you can't argue from a position of ignorance after discussing various ideas and evaluating their veracity? To pass a critical thinking test, your arguments must be egregiously different from what is circulated on a gossip forum. Yours must, by necessity, be based on facts from beginning to end. When it comes to critical thinking, it's also important to remember that having knowledge isn't enough. You should be able to arrange the events you understand and other facts you know in a logical order, and you should be fairly clear about what point you are putting where and why. The point is that as part of your critical thinking, you must be able to analyze data and real-world issues in a way that makes sense of what you've learned. When you're able to put what you've learned into context, the knowledge you've gained can be put to better use. The importance of critical thinking. As you've just seen, critical thinking allows you to use your knowledge to contribute to a greater good. Take a look at the following points to see how this process can assist you. You get to make a list of any arguments that aren't supported by evidence. You get to make a note of any inaccuracies in the data. You have the opportunity to present objective arguments. You get to add more facts to any objective arguments you've already made. You have the opportunity to strengthen your good arguments with logical arguments. You have the opportunity to positively contribute to tasks that you find useful. You have the chance to improve on existing theories. You'll have the chance to improve on the current mode of operation. You have the opportunity to change the way institutions operate and improve their strengths. As a result, critical thinking comes in handy whenever your knowledge is required, and it is crucial that it be analyzed and assessed objectively. Is critical thinking a hindrance to creative thinking? It doesn't work that way. Many critical thinkers, on the other hand, are adept at ruminating beyond the norm, below the surface, past the scope of what ordinary people might consider, or, as the expression goes, thinking outside the box. Being inventive, perhaps even adventurous in the use of your thoughts, is unquestionably the definition of being imaginative. For the most part, the fact that you are required to use logic when thinking critically does not rule out the possibility of being creative. Despite the fact that your imagination is free to roam, you cannot afford to be careless or reckless. Instead, you evaluate the points, and if they do not make sense in the context of the discussion, you eliminate them. Streamlining the process of thinking. Streamlining is the process of giving your thoughts a direction. When you consider that you very likely do not have a monopoly on certain information on which you are basing your arguments, you will understand how critical this is. It is therefore your values and your level of critical thinking competency that determines the type of argument you fashion, as well as the extent to which that argument will be beneficial to all parties involved. Do you believe that legal experts lose cases because of a lack of sufficient information? The majority of the time, this is not the case. Often, one party is better at critical thinking than the other, or the personal values of one party are at odds with the values of the jury, and as a result, the two sides are unable to agree, despite the fact that they have the same information, the same statutes, but different arguments and varying conclusions. The same logic is in play in other fields as well, such as business and public policy, among others. When it comes to making important decisions, research is carried out in order to gather data and information for consideration. Final decisions are reached after it has been thoroughly examined within the framework of critical thinking. Helping to improve the global economy. The availability of well-analyzed data is essential when dealing with today's market forces, available resources, and the geographic locations where those resources can be found. If you are to form useful information from your research, it is essential to use critical thinking throughout this process. Otherwise, you would have underutilized resources. Others would have been overworked, and still others would have been misused. The ability to use critical thinking allows you to determine whether it is feasible to establish a factory in one location or another, and whether it is more cost-effective to employ labor-intensive manufacturing methods rather than mechanically based processes. For example, establishing an industry in country A as opposed to one in country B, and even exporting your products to country B rather than another country are all examples of fundamental consideration. You should be aware that critical thinking assumes you have enough information to make decisions, and that you are going to conduct the necessary research in that regard and are aware of the criteria you need to further investigate. Have you considered the implications of the fact that you are not relying on sloppy data in your decision making when critical thinking is involved? This is not possible to achieve. In fact, claiming to use information in its raw form would be a risky proposition in business, politics, and even one's personal life if one were to do so. As a result, it is crucial in large projects to have a team of people who are responsible for analyzing the information at hand and doing so in an appropriate context, ensuring that the information is put to effective use. What other reason do you think institutions with a lot of influence form think tanks? Another thing to keep in mind is that critical thinking requires you to not only be well informed, but also to think in a broader context than you might otherwise. Remember, we are living in the technological age, and no matter what your field of expertise is, you can take advantage of tremendous opportunities on a global scale if you exercise sound critical thinking. Finding and communicating with people all over the world helps you stay on top of things when it comes to timing, whether you're looking for export opportunities, more favorable import prices, more suitable immigration rules, or anything else. All of these processes are part of the process of critical thinking and analysis, helping to enhance efficiency in communication. Critical thinking allows you to organize data in a way that creates a reasonable picture of something or a situation, one that aids you in forming an opinion, and even one that allows you to make a decision based on the picture you've constructed. As part of critical thinking, you will have the opportunity to analyze and evaluate data with the goal of making an informed opinion about a given situation. In short, you can only present a valid argument for an idea if you have engaged in critical thinking throughout the process. Increasing one's creativity. Do you ever imagine that creativity begins and ends with the arrangement of colors and patterns to create an enticing image? Unfortunately, this is not the case. It goes far beyond that and includes the ability to organize ideas in a variety of ways and then evaluate what each set of ideas reflects. You can use a crude analogy to illustrate this point, such as the comparison between the concept of eating and the concept of living. If you organize those two ideas correctly, you could be either living to eat or eating to live, depending on your situation. Consider how different your life would be if you had to choose between the two scenarios. This is important because critical thinking will encourage you to look for additional ideas, discard some ideas, and adopt others. All of this thinking and weighing of options results in a significant sharpening of your creative abilities. Promoting self-reflection. When you engage in critical thinking, you evaluate every decision you intend to make in advance and weigh the advantages and disadvantages of each option. Because you are committed to living a fruitful life, you consider all of the options available to you in all areas of your life. You will only choose a route to take after conducting a reasonable and comprehensive assessment. Of course, your personal values are taken into consideration at all times. When it comes to critical thinking, self-reflection is an unavoidable part of the process that cannot be avoided, providing a solid foundation for any scientific findings and development. We are talking about a field that deals with facts and precise data rather than assumptions and broad generalizations in this case. As a result, critical thinking is an unavoidable requirement if you want to make any progress in science. Scientists are well known for developing theories after engaging in lengthy bouts of critical thinking, and the theories and principles that they develop have proven to be enduring over the course of history. Consider the law of buoyancy, the law of reflection, the oxygen theory of combustion, and other theories of buoyancy and reflection. Providing grounds for democracy. Well, without getting into the politics of critical thinking, You will understand that being able to make an informed decision of your own free will is an important part of democracy. In fact, how can one assert that democracy is in operation, for example, if the information is not being disseminated to those who are engaged in voting in its correct form, in its entirety, and in a timely manner? How can anyone conclude that there is democracy at work if the environment is not conducive to challenging the information provided, or even checking the veracity of the information provided? Overall, whenever critical thinking is encouraged, a sense of democratic space is created, and the people involved are content to make well-informed decisions. It is through this process that politicians who are opportunists are weeded out, and chances are offered to politicians with vision who are willing to sincerely serve their constituents. It is also through such a process of critical thinking that people can be relieved of their unfounded fears, some of which may be caused by general biases and prejudices. The portrait of a critical thinker. When you improve your ability to think critically, you will notice an increase in a variety of characteristics that will make you more socially desirable in the long run. Because of your increased emotional intelligence, you will become someone that more people want to be around. Emotional intelligence is one of those buzzwords in today's society that refers to the ability to get along with people better, as well as the ability to manage your relationships and interactions with other people as a result of your increased ability to understand and control yourself and your emotional states. This is due to the accumulation of a number of other characteristics, such as inquisitiveness. The critical thinker is inquisitive. They are constantly willing to ask questions and gain a better understanding of their surroundings. They are motivated by a desire to better understand others, and they will make it a point to learn about a variety of different issues around the world in order to gain a clear understanding of how they affect others in the process. Attentiveness. When it comes to critical thinking, the critical thinker is acutely aware of the extent of his or her abilities and is constantly on the lookout for situations in which critical thinking is required and warranted. When it appears that critical thinking might be applicable, it is employed, even if it appears that a simpler, more straightforward solution might be available. Self-confidence. It is possible for the critical thinker to gain confidence as a result of his or her awareness of his or her abilities. The critical thinker is confident in his or her ability to reason and has faith that it will be done when the situation calls for it to be done. Open-mindedness. The critical thinker is willing to acknowledge that different points of view exist in the world and that this is entirely fine. They are open to hearing and considering other people's opinions and assertions, and they are willing to give them the same benefit of the doubt that they would give to others. Flexibility. Flexibility is recognized by the critical thinker as a necessity at times, especially when considering opposing viewpoints or viewpoints that do not align with their own beliefs in the first place, and they are prepared to exercise this flexibility when necessary. These individuals are willing to give those difficult issues the time and attention they deserve, and they will not shut down when confronted with a point of view that differs from their own. When something goes wrong and changes are required, they are able to adapt and roll with the punches. Alertness. They are well aware of what is likely to occur in the future, and they begin anticipating any events that may occur as a result of their knowledge. In order to understand what is going on in their immediate environment, these people are usually paying close attention to politics and political tensions, understanding other people's opinions. It is likely that the critical thinker will pay attention to what other people have to say, even if they disagree with their beliefs or consider that their opinions are irrelevant or unimportant. In order to avoid immediately dismissing the other person's point of view as illegitimate, they will take the time to listen to and understand their point of view. Fair and appraising reasoning. Rather than unfairly judging other people's approaches to their reasoning, the critical thinker will make it a point to give each and every argument a fair evaluation. If an argument does not align with the critical thinker's own beliefs, it will not be dismissed out of hand. The critical thinker is able to recognize his or her own biases and prejudices, and by being honest about those biases and prejudices, he or she is able to correct them before they become a problem in the future. In other words, it is the ability to self-regulate and self-control, understanding when to stop, make, and alter judgments. In response to feedback and an understanding of the situation, The critical thinker can determine when it is appropriate to cease attempting to make a judgment, to finally make one, or to change one already made. Willingness to reconsider and revisit viewpoints when change is necessary. It is possible for the critical thinker to recognize when it is necessary to reconsider what he or she was thinking about a situation in order to change a viewpoint if it has since come to light that the viewpoint expressed was something negative or could not be validated in any way. The not-so-critical thinker's portrait. This is someone who believes that there is no reason to consider a situation critically. These individuals may face difficulties in their relationships and careers, as it is much more difficult to find a job that does not require higher-level thinking skills. However, let us look at some of the common characteristics of non-critical thinkers. Someone who is unable to think critically is likely to be arrogant. They may claim to know or understand rather than admit the truth out of embarrassment, and they are frequently unaware of their own flaws or limitations. This person considers conflict an annoyance. Any dispute that arises is likely to be perceived as a threat to the ego rather than something that requires attention by someone who is struggling to think critically. Anyone who tries to refute them is likely to feel threatened or annoyed and will dismiss the claims without hesitation. Impatient and unwilling to put in the effort to learn. Someone who struggles to think critically is likely to be impatient all of the time. If something is complicated, they will skip to the end and make a best guess rather than try to understand it. They would rather rush to the end than learn, despite the fact that this leaves them in a state of confusion. Instead of relying on evidence, go with your gut. The focus of the non-critical thinker is usually emotional. This person's thought process is driven by their emotions. When asked whether they would prefer a sports car or an SUV, they will choose the sports car because it excites them, even though an SUV would probably be more practical. They are so engrossed in their emotions that they fail to notice data and evidence, which can lead them to act rashly rather than logically. They are preoccupied with themselves. They are always correct to the uncritical thinker. They are so caught up in their own perspectives on the world, and as a result, they are unwilling to consider anyone else's point of view. When someone else expresses dissatisfaction, the uncritical thinker immediately begins to focus on how to best refute the claim, rather than learning about the other person's point of view, which may be quite valid. Viewpoints that are in agreement with them or that are supportive of their own will always be given precedence. I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you are feeling about this audiobook in the comments section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, please, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let us carry on with the next chapter. Chapter 2. Mental Models for Critical Thinking. Mental models influence not only our thoughts, but also our actions. We use mental models all the time, even when we aren't aware of it. We are bound to develop familiar patterns of behavior when we only have a few mental models at our disposal, because our thoughts and decisions will be limited to the range of mental models we have. In this case, when difficulties arise, we will inevitably revert to old patterns in an attempt to solve them, or resign ourselves to simply coping with them. When people talk about improving their minds, what they focus on is arming themselves with knowledge and distinguishing the thoughts they should have. Surprisingly, they fail to consider how the mind functions. As a result, when people try to improve their thinking skills, they simply pay attention to what they are thinking about and the information they allow into their minds. This is not the most effective method of brain development. It is critical that you monitor how you think in order to improve how you ruminate. To put it another way, you should think about thinking. So, how can you tell if you're thinking critically? Critical thinking is a complex process. However, if you spend time considering whether your ideas make sense, you can argue that you are thinking critically. When you are a critical thinker, you can do a variety of things. For starters, you'll find it simple to understand logical connections between various ideas. You will also solve your problems in a more systematic manner. Not only that, but you will be able to assess the appropriateness and significance of ideas. Critical thinking is a skill that almost anyone can learn. However, most people fail to develop the skill due to critical thinking misconceptions. For example, many people will conclude that the process is difficult and will abandon it. As a result, their lack of knowledge about critical thinking and its significance prevents them from becoming interested in the subject. Some will argue that critical thinking is a detached, cold, and unemotional process. What these people don't realize is that critical thinking is liberating. You will be more resourceful if you can think critically. As a result, this is a liberating experience because you will be honing your critical thinking skills on occasion. Other people will be discouraged from going through the process because they believe it will result in change. Indeed, critical thinking will assist you in detaching from old assumptions that you may have held on to. As a result, you will be better informed about the best strategies for making systematic decisions. So, if you know what you're getting into, it's not a bad idea. Components of critical thinking. Critical thinking is a skill that you must be proficient with. It consists of several components that define how critical thinking works and how it can assist you in thinking critically. The main elements of critical thinking are discussed briefly in the following paragraphs. Perception. People have different perspectives on the experiences that they encounter. Something that excites one person may be considered less exciting by another. As a result, perception is how people interpret their observations, ideas, experiences, and so on. Your perception will influence how you think. You will think positively about an experience if you are pleased with it. On the contrary, if you are unhappy, you will have every reason to dislike a specific activity. Assumptions. Assumptions shape how you think. They are an essential component of critical thinking. Frequently, the assumptions we make are implied. As a result, some people may be unaware that they are making assumptions before making a decision. People are prone to making assumptions because they are at ease with them. They are usually derived from how we perceive the world around us. They are determined by our beliefs and how we choose to interpret certain concepts. Emotion. Thoughts are also triggered by emotions. As a result, you can't think if you don't have any emotions. Critical thinkers have mastered the art of learning to cogitate without allowing emotions to interfere. They work to increase self-awareness. They become aware of the presence of these emotions and learn to let them go. Argument. Critical thinking necessitates the development of an argument in addition to the elements listed above. You will be arguing with yourself about whether something is true or false, valid or invalid. You should be able to come up with a reasonable argument after critical thinking. Logic. Logic incorporates the concepts of deductive and inductive reasoning. The former is based on the hypotheses or broad statements. Deductive reasoning encourages you to assess the likelihood of achieving a specific goal. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, takes observations into account and generates broad generalizations. In other words, in order to draw conclusions, you must first make observations. Both types of reasoning will help you become a wise decision maker. Understanding claims, issues, and arguments. After exploring some of the elements of critical thinking, it is critical that you understand how claims, issues, and arguments play an important role in critical thinking. Claims. People may say something about what they choose to believe based on their beliefs. In politics, for example, people will choose to support one candidate over another based on their beliefs about the candidate. As a result, their statements are claims. A few people will agree with me on this. Claims are statements made by people to express their feelings about a specific topic. Claims are not facts. As a result, they are debatable. There are various types of claims. Some claims are debatable, while others are simply an obvious true or false. This means that some of the claims we make will require careful scrutiny, whereas others will not, due to their obvious nature. Claims about personal decisions you should make should be carefully evaluated. For example, if you claim you want to marry the person you're dating, this claim will necessitate an evaluation of its viability before you act on it. Furthermore, claims that touch on societal issues will necessitate a thorough examination. Government cannot simply claim that it provides free healthcare to its citizens. Issues. After expressing your opinion through claims, you will want to challenge these claims. For example, the claim of whether or not to marry the person you are dating can be questioned. Putting your claim to the test raises a problem. This is where critical thinking skills come into play. The manner in which you evaluate your claims and develop a reasonable argument will reveal a great deal about your critical thinking abilities. To resolve your problem, you must respond to the question raised on your claims. Should you get married or not? This sparks an argument. However, in order for your claim to be considered an argument, you must provide solid evidence relating to your issue of whether or not to marry. This means that if you don't have evidence to back up your claim, it won't be investigated further. For example, if you haven't met the person you intend to marry, your claim will be unarguable. It's self-evident that this cannot happen. As a result, there is no debate about an issue that cannot be raised. Arguments. After raising an issue, the next step is to decide whether to move to the left or right. As previously stated, arguments are an essential component of critical thinking. This is the stage at which you decide whether a claim is true or false, valid or invalid. People have a tendency to complicate arguments. In reality, they are quite simple. When presenting your argument, you should only provide reasons why you believe your claim is valid or invalid, depending on the issue at hand. If someone claims that they should marry because they fell in love, this is just their opinion. You can't tell whether their argument is valid at this point. Critical thinking is all about determining whether arguments are valid or invalid. Many factors must be considered before claiming that an argument is good. Critical thinking mental models should assist you in making sound decisions. Some of these models are discussed in the section that follows. Other mental models of critical thinking. The mental models discussed in this section can be used in conjunction with other models. The ad hominem. The ad hominem mental model is essentially a character attack. Instead of focusing on the argument, one will focus on discrediting the character of another person during an argument. For example, one could make a compelling case for a particular political issue. Instead of debating the claim, someone could discredit the individual by claiming that they were previously arrested or that they are unworthy of discussion. You may have had a similar experience in the past. People sometimes tend to focus on discrediting others in order to dismiss any reasonable arguments they may have been presented. Surfing or riding the wave. This mental model is most useful in business situations. There are numerous opportunities to take advantage of when entering any untapped market. The surfing mental model, as articulated by Charlie Munger, argues that a company should strive to maintain its position in the wave in order to ensure that it continues to expand. Similar to the sport of surfing, if a surfer approaches a wave at the right time, they can only surf for a long period of time if they maintain the proper position on the wave. As a result, this model emphasizes the importance of making the most of any situation that comes your way. It does not have to be limited to business. The model can be used in real life. This means you should strategically position yourself so that you can take full advantage of situations that have a positive impact on your life. Control illusion. The uncertainties of this world frequently lead people to make bad decisions or simply give up on what they set out to do. When confronted with difficult situations, the best way to deal with them is to believe that you can overcome them. Allowing yourself to believe that you can't do it only drives you to give up. If you believe you cannot do it, there is almost certainly nothing you can do about it. Unfortunately, the inability to act on a situation does not end there. You may experience negative consequences as a result of your current mindset. You will experience cognitive stress in this case. You'll be so worked up that you won't be able to do anything to get out of the predicament you're in. The mental model of the illusion of control is a framework that can assist you in eliminating uncertainty. This model will help you develop the mindset that everything is under control. As a result, you will have every reason to be optimistic about your future. Developing a sense of control allows you to live your life with energy. It will excite you that you are always optimistic about everything, regardless of how others perceive your choices. The concept of living with certainty should not be overstated. One thing is certain: if we all knew what our futures held, life would be extremely boring. We'd be forced to live a life devoid of thrills and surprises. Regardless, it is critical that you maintain a positive attitude. You should work hard to train your mind to believe that everything is under control. Finally, you'll have more control over your life. Applying mental models in critical thinking. Let's look at how you can apply some of the mental models we discussed earlier to improve your critical thinking skills after we looked at a few mental models. Critical thinking and the Pareto principle. Critical thinking can indeed change your life since you will be making systematic decisions more often. Of course, we can't deny that our choices have an impact on our lives. When we make the right decisions, it has an impact on the events that occur in our lives. For example, deciding whether or not to marry can have a significant impact on your life. Similarly, making the right decision to start a business can completely transform your life. Surprisingly, the activities we engage in every day define our lives. If you choose to sleep rather than work, you can rest assured that you will not achieve any of your objectives. Working more hours in a day, however, does not guarantee that you will be more productive. In his Pareto principle, Vilfredo Pareto argued that you can get more done with less. So, how should you apply this mental model to your daily activities in order to think critically about them? People are frequently faced with the challenge of only purchasing what they require. Have you ever succumbed to impulse purchases? We've all done it. You're walking down the street when you see something that catches your eye and you decide to buy it without hesitation. After a day or two, you realize that the item you purchased is unnecessary in your life, so you discard it. Your wardrobe is proof that you have shopped for items that only take up space in your home. The Pareto principle states that 20% of your wardrobe accounts for 80% of what you wear on a regular basis. This means that the majority of the items in your closet are simply there to take up space. You can apply the same principle to your personal relationships. You may wish to believe that you have a large number of friends at times. However, you can only interact with a select few of them. This is clearly visible in your smartphone's call log. Some people you call friends, despite the fact that you rarely communicate with them. The Pareto principle is based on the idea that you have a finite amount of resources to work with. As a result, you should learn to prioritize your priorities. When considering whether or not to participate in certain activities, take a step back and consider whether or not they are important to you. You should devote more time to tasks that are more important to you. Adopting an 80-20 mindset will help you value your time and prioritize your priorities. In the end, chasing the wind will be a waste of time. Critical thinking and the 10-10-10 rule. The 10-10-10 rule can also help you think critically and overcome tough decisions that you might be facing. Assume you've been offered a fantastic job opportunity. You spent your entire life preparing for this moment. The promotion not only provides you with more money, but it also elevates you from your current position. Such chances do not come along very often. The first thing that comes to mind is that you should immediately accept the offer without thinking twice. Accepting this position, however, will actually require you to move. You're torn apart by the prospect of moving states because you've spent years establishing your current local network. Your loved ones have come to visit you. Your neighbors are people you've met and who've become like family to you. You're starting to wonder if you'll be able to leave your friends and family behind in order to pursue your dream job. It's also a difficult decision to move with your family because you'll be disrupting their lives. If they are moving with you, they will have to change schools and will miss their friends. It is true that you are faced with a difficult decision and are unsure of what to do. So do you think you should stay or do you think you should go? An interesting thing about decision making is that the majority of the decisions we make in a hurry or under duress end up being regrettable. It's not easy to make difficult decisions. As a result, you should pause, consider your options, and make the best decision possible. This is why the mental model of 10-10-10 is necessary. To refresh your memory, the 10-10-10 framework allows you to consider the consequences of your actions before making a choice. You will ask yourself how you will feel in 10 minutes after making a specific decision before agreeing to do something. You'll also consider how you'll feel 10 months from now if you make that choice. Finally, consider how you'll feel 10 years from now. Why is it critical to think about these questions before taking action? By allowing you to ruminate in the absence of your emotions, the 10-10-10 mental model aids critical thinking. You end up thinking twice or 3 times about the consequences of your decisions rather than being influenced by the thrill of your emotion. In most aspects of your life, the 10-10-10 rule should apply. Take, for example, deciding to marry. The majority of people let their emotions carry them away. You can be dating someone one minute and want to marry them the next. Stop and use the 10-10-10 framework before taking any further action. What would you think if you got married 10 minutes later? There's no way you'd know the difference. How do you think you'll feel 10 months after your wedding? Perhaps you'll remain content and happy. In 10 years, how about it? Will you be able to put up with your partner's eccentricities any longer? Will you support them in good times and bad? The 10-10-10 rule can assist you in thinking critically about major life decisions in profound ways. So make certain you have it in your toolbox. Chapter 3: Cognitive Bias and Fallacies. Memories stored in our brains of a similar event may create a bias that will lead to a change in thinking and decision-making. These biases could disrupt an entire process, leading to a choice that is not in the optimal range for the mental model. Cognitive bias will be an error in reasoning that may divert the decision-maker from making any rational deduction. To a certain extent, we will find the cognitive bias we have is going to be a completely natural phenomenon. It is simply the way the brain is going to work. It is often going to be a very complex process for the brain to work through every piece of information that comes to it from all of our senses, from touch, taste, sound, sight, and hearing. Keep in mind, there will be some types of cognitive biases that are not considered natural. These will be created from a few different things, such as misinformation, an education of parents, school, traditional practices, and more. It's not natural to have these kinds of cognitive biases, and if you realize that these are the things you're dealing with, then it's something you have to manage. How cognitive biases weaken your mental models. Each of the following solutions offered by cognitive biases also has its respective disadvantages. The key to avoiding further problems, therefore, is to be aware that shortcuts are being taken rather than making deliberate but sound decisions. Consider these 4 issues that stem from the overuse of cognitive biases in a person's daily life. You do not get to see everything. Filters are beneficial to you if and only if they block unnecessary information. However, in most cases, people are unable to adjust their filters accordingly, leading to the loss of key information that could be useful in making a decision. Your search for meaning can lead you to illogical or even harmful assumptions. Imagining how an event has happened can quickly become a source of error and misjudgment. You are essentially fabricating a story that fits only your point of view rather than the whole truth of the situation. Decisions that are made too quickly tend to have serious flaws. Hasty decisions are often selfish because you didn't have the opportunity to consider each side of the story. They can also be counterproductive, since most of the time they are partially or completely wrong. Your memories can further strengthen the mental errors you have made. The bits of information you save tend to fit what you already have. It means that instead of expanding your mind, you are only reinforcing both the good and bad attitudes and beliefs you have about people, objects, events, and more. Given these, you can conclude that cognitive biases are like any other you may have at your disposal. When used correctly in context and in moderation, they can be quite useful and at times even life-saving. However, when abused, over-reliance on cognitive biases can create more problems and lead to more harm. The human brain is capable of remarkable feats of ingenuity and resourcefulness. It also plays an essential role in the plans and decisions that are made for everyday life, such as remembering the conversations you have had with your friends and having a productive day at work with your colleagues. The brain is indeed susceptible to being misled. Fortunately, it is also capable of improving the important mental structures that underlie your thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors. Ambiguity effect. This is where you avoid situations when you don't know if the outcome will be favorable to you or not. Anchoring. This is when you rely too much on one piece of information during the decision-making process. Generally, it is the first piece of information you receive. Personification. This is where animals, objects, and concepts are characterized as having the same tendencies as humans. It is giving non-humans traits, emotions, and intentions that are normally reserved for humans to inanimate objects and things. Attention bias. This is where your perception is affected by the thoughts that continue to occur. Automation bias. This is where you believe the automated information you receive, and you rely excessively on these automated systems, often going against what you know is the right decision. Availability heuristic. This is when the probability of something happening is overestimated because you remember it better than other things. It can influence our memories, and our emotions can change. Availability cascade. This is where collective beliefs become more plausible because of the repetition the public gives them. This confirms the saying that if something is repeated long enough, it will become true. Backfire effect. This is where we refuse to believe the evidence that does not support our policy. Bandwagon effect. This is basically where you're doing something just because a group of people are doing the same thing. Base rate fallacy. These concern focus on specific information that only relates to a certain situation rather than looking at the general information in front of you. Belief bias. This is where you skew your argument because you believe so strongly in the conclusion. Ben Franklin effect. Someone is more likely to do someone a favor if they have already done so. This is in contrast to if they had received a favor from the same person. Blind spot of bias. It is where we see ourselves in a less partial light than we see other people. We are more capable of seeing prejudice in someone else than in ourselves. Biased support for choice. This is where we remember the choices someone made better than they do. Grouping illusion. This is where we see the phantom fat patterns instead of looking at the whole picture. Confirmation bias. This is where we only focus on information that will confirm what we already believe. Consistency bias. This is where we tend to test solutions directly rather than looking for alternatives. Conjunction fallacy. This is where we look beyond the general conditions in favor of the very specific ones, as more likely than the first. Revision of beliefs. This is where we refuse to reform our own beliefs even when new and valid information is presented to us. The effect of continued influence. This is where we continually learn information that is incorrect, even after it has been corrected. The curse of knowledge. This is where the best-informed people have difficulty seeing something from the perspective of someone with less information. Default affection. This is where we favor the default solution over the other options we are given. The empathy gap. It is where people often do not give credit to the influence or strength of their feelings or those of another person. The illusion of the end of the story. This is where we allow ourselves to believe that in the future, we will change less than we have changed in the past. Focusing the effect. This is where we place too much importance or value on an area of an event that is happening. The player's fallacy. This is where we think future possibilities will be affected by events that have occurred before. Difficult affection, easy. This is where our confidence in the judgments we are making is either too conservative or not extreme enough. Identifiable victim effect. This is when we respond most strongly to someone we've identified as being in danger, rather than to an entire group of people who are in danger. Effects of IKEA. This is where we put a disproportionate value on objects that are not fully assembled, and the value is high. We don't look at the quality at the end of the result. Impact bias. This is where we tend to overestimate the duration of something or the intensity of the impact. The law of the instrument. This is where we overly rely on unfamiliar tools and methods, ignoring alternative approaches. Bias of omission. This is where we tend to fail to judge something as harmful when compared to something that is less moral and equally harmful. It usually revolves around our actions. Bias towards pessimism. This is where we overestimate the chances of negative things happening to people. Projection bias. This is where we overestimate how much we will have in common with our future selves. We assume we will have the same preferences, thoughts, and values, which leads us to make decisions that are either suboptimal or inferior. Effective overconfidence. This is where we rely solely on our pride to answer questions. Restriction bias. This is where we think we can show more restraint than we really can when faced with temptation. Perception of selection. This is where expectations will often alter and affect the perceptions we have. Zero risk bias. This is where we would prefer to reduce a small risk to zero rather than make a larger reduction to a small risk. Cognitive bias is an error in the way we think. It affects our decision-making ability as well as our judgment. One of the first ways it's influenced is through our personal bias, which will ultimately affect your decision based on emotion rather than fact. Our ethical compass is always working and always pointing in the direction we would like to believe we are heading. We want to draw conclusions that are objective, reasonable in scope, and detailed using the information provided. When we are distracted, shocked, anxious, or careless, these prejudices that we work so hard to eliminate slowly slide away. Normally, we are not aware of these prejudices when we decide on something. Therefore, they remain in your decision-making models, and you end up with unsuccessful conclusions and judgments, not based on objective facts and truths. Ultimately, you are making bad decisions. Chapter 4. Problem-Solving Techniques. Have you ever found yourself thinking, I wish I hadn't jumped to that conclusion so quickly? Maybe I didn't solve the right problem. Maybe I acted too quickly without all the information, or something similar. We've all been in situations similar to this. As a result, knowing how to solve this type of problem is critical. Furthermore, when it comes to making decisions, problem solving is a lifesaver. If you're good at solving problems, you will be able to come up with a well-thought-out and foolproof decision quickly and easily. Nobody is born with exceptional problem-solving abilities. We must learn and develop these abilities over time and through trial and error. Here are a few tried and true methods for doing so. Become solution-focused. Shift your focus away from the problem and toward the solution to become a better problem solver. You don't have to rule out the possibility entirely. You simply need to approach it differently and train yourself to focus more on finding a solution to the problem. When you're stuck in a rut, acknowledge that you're stuck. Saying things like, I'm stuck in this problem, or simply observing your emotions and allowing them to subside on their own can also help. Once your emotions have calmed down a bit, concentrate on the situation at hand and analyze it objectively and thoroughly. Replace negative thoughts with positive suggestions and tell yourself things like, I am finding solutions for my problem over and over. Consider and write down potential solutions to the problem. When looking for solutions, make a list of everything that comes to mind, even if it seems ridiculous or impossible at first. To improve your creativity, keep your mind open to anything you can think of. After you've compiled a list of potential solutions, examine them thoroughly, weighing the advantages and disadvantages of each option against one another. Choose a solution with the most benefits and fewest drawbacks and put it into action right away. When you start focusing more on the solution, you begin to think more optimistically, which broadens your horizons and aids you in developing innovative and effective solutions to all of life's challenges. Clearly define your problem. Often the solution is hidden within the problem, and the only way to find it is to define the problem clearly. When we are confronted with a problem, we tend to look at it from only one perspective. We rarely delve into the root cause. You should concentrate more on the why part of the problem in order to define it clearly. The example below demonstrates how to accomplish this. If you are constantly late for work, you should ask yourself the following questions and respond appropriately. How come I'm always late for work? Because I keep snoozing my alarm clock in order to get more sleep? What makes me want to sleep more? Because when I wake up, I'm extremely tired. How come I'm exhausted, even though I've only just woken up? I sleep late every day because I'm a night owl. How come I always sleep late? Because I'm always surfing the web or binge-watching Netflix shows late at night. What motivates me to participate in the above-mentioned activities? I'm bored, she says. Can you tell me why I'm bored? I'm bored because I don't have any good friends or healthy activities to do. Apply this strategy to all of your issues until you have a clear picture of the underlying issues, causes, conflicts, and so on. Once you've figured that out, you can address it first and then work your way through the rest of the whys you listed earlier. Following the example given above, you can begin by making it a habit to play tennis with a friend an hour before bedtime so that you are entertained and exhausted and go to bed on time the next day, allowing you to wake up fresh the next day and arrive at work on time. The next time you have a problem, use the steps outlined above to clearly define it so you can figure out the best way to permanently solve it. Make things simpler. We worry when we face a challenge or difficulty because we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Things are rarely as complicated as we imagine them to be. To solve your problems, keep things as simple as possible. If you're worried about getting the promotion you've been eyeing for months, don't worry about who might get it. Instead, focus on improving your performance to improve your chances of getting it. You can easily solve a problem if you break it down to its simplest form. Work on your inner language and think laterally. When most of us face a problem, we tend to focus on only one aspect of the situation. This is one of the main reasons why we never come up with novel solutions. Think laterally to change your flow of thoughts and turn things around. By flipping your objective around, you can try to see things from a different perspective. Take a walk outside to get some fresh air, take a few deep breaths, and keep asking yourself, how can I do things differently to come up with a new solution? Alternatively, consider what someone smarter than you would do in the situation. These questions will encourage you to consider alternative solutions and broaden your horizons. Work on incorporating a possibility of creating language into your everyday conversation. When you're confronted with a problem, think about it in terms of asking yourself, what if I do this? Why don't I give this method a shot? What other methods might others employ? This encourages you to think positively and imagine new possibilities in order to come up with great innovative solutions. At the same time, it's impossible to avoid using negative and closed statements like this, or this will never work. Such statements restrict your options and stifle any forward momentum you might have in solving the problem. When you use these strategies, keep track of how they work for you and learn from your mistakes so you can get better results the next time. The advantages of problem-solving techniques. If you want to take your existence from plain and simple to the next level, critical thinking is the one aspect you will use the most in your life. Every person on the planet faces difficulties. These problems present themselves in a variety of ways, and they are unique to each of us, but we all experience them. Many of us now sit back and close our eyes, hoping that our problems will go away on their own. They don't, however. You will need to think critically about your problems in order to solve them. Separate those tribulations. Look for alternatives. Look for ways to take advantage of certain aspects of the struggle. Consider the issue in a personal and independent manner. Others' advice is helpful, but at the end of the day, it's still your problem, and you're the only one who can deal with it while it's still there and eventually solve it. The pitfalls of the fix-it-and-forget-it problem-solving approach. The abundance of information available on the internet has both benefited and harmed society today. We all go about our days, and when we come across something we don't understand, we look it up on the internet, fix it, and move on. There's almost a robotic movement going on here, and it's not good for critical thinking. We take a quick look at the online solution, then shut down our computer and go about our business. There is no takeaway, and nothing that can be applied to a different situation. Many people, of course, argue that there is nothing wrong with it. They believe that because we will always have access to the internet, there will be no need to learn the method because we can simply look it up. To some extent, they are correct in that access to the internet is something that many of us have on a regular basis, but they are incorrect in that we must develop problem-solving skills. You are faced with decisions every day, and how will you progress in life if you lack the necessary skills to solve them? For example, we can look up how to bake a cake, how to drive a car, and even how to build a car on the internet. When it comes to such things, you're all set. However, you cannot ask the internet whether you should apply for that job in the next town, whether you should invest in your friend's business idea, or how you will apologize to your wife when you believe you are correct. These are real-world issues for which Google will never have an answer, even if you ask 1,000 times. This is why you should work on improving your problem-solving abilities, which are largely based on critical thinking. Don't just focus on a problem or a decision that needs to be made, examine it. When faced with a choice, whether it's a problem to solve or a decision that will improve your life, you should ask yourself what you would do. When problems like these arise, we often turn to our friends and family to ask what they would do in the same situation. The issue with this scenario is that what is best for another person may not be best for you. You may have passed up a great job opportunity because your cousin said they wouldn't do it, or you may have allowed your marriage to fall apart because your friend wouldn't try to fix the problems if he were in your situation. Don't get me wrong, having advice is always helpful, but you can't base your actions on your life on what others would do. You must consider what you would and should do in this situation. Consider the advantages and disadvantages of any situation. Consider whether it would be better to do it one way or the other. Determine the risks and whether you're willing to risk losing whatever you're putting on the line if you lose the bet. Life is a series of decisions and questions that you must learn to make, as well as accepting the consequences of those decisions. Critical thinking is a valuable skill to have because it will assist you in learning how to improve other aspects of your life and ensuring that you are satisfied with the outcomes. When you ask everyone else what they would do in a problem or make a decision, You are avoiding taking responsibility for the outcome, which is the entire point of analytical thinking. You are happy if it works out well. If it does not, you can blame the other person for not making a decision that was beneficial to you. If you improve your independent thinking skills, you will be able to make decisions with complete confidence that they will turn out well. Of course, something could go wrong, but at the end of the day, you understand. You have the ability to make the decision knowing what you are getting into from the start. It's a very different approach to dealing with problems than constantly asking others what they would do. You'll learn to stand on your own 2 feet in any situation, and you'll discover that you can make confident decisions, improving problem solving and decision making skills. The worst thing that can taint our decision making ability is when we struggle because we're afraid of making the wrong one. In fact, the majority of the stress we experience stems from our fear of making the wrong decision. Making decisions is a difficult task. This is why we frequently delegate decision making to others. Consider the last time you went grocery shopping. Perhaps you were undecided about which snack to purchase. Your decision was aided by a display of on-sale candy bars or chips. Then you got home and sat down in front of the television, eager to find something entertaining to watch. Rather than scrolling, you chose the first option that was suggested to you. Although it appeared that you made a choice, the majority of these decisions were made for you throughout the day. When we have trouble making decisions, we also have trouble solving problems. It will be difficult to make a quick decision if you are unsure of yourself, don't think critically, or suffer from mental fog. Although not all problems require immediate resolution, many of us will struggle to find the right answer due to the jumbled thoughts in our heads. Making decisions can be difficult due to the abundance of other distractions that can obstruct clear thinking. Assume you're in the kitchen, attempting to bake a cake. It will be more difficult to concentrate on the cake if dinner is already cooking in the oven, dishes are piling up in the sink, and another person is attempting to make a snack. To make it easier to think quickly, we must keep our heads clear. To do so, follow these steps. Make a list of the most important things on your mind. Examine the simplest version of the problem or decision. Conduct a thorough investigation to uncover all viable options. Let's start by looking at how to prioritize your most important thoughts. How to prioritize important thoughts. You'll want to learn how to better prioritize the items that are most important to you in order to work optimally and get the things done that need to be done. We frequently attempt to do the things we want to get out of the way at the time. Perhaps you're cleaning your house and need to do the dishes, laundry, and tidy your room. However, as you walk around the house, you'll notice smaller tasks that need to be completed, making it easy to become distracted. What matters most is that we prioritize the tasks that we initially set out to complete because they are critical. Is it really that important to you that you didn't think of completing the other tasks until they were right in front of you? First, determine the importance of the task, how quickly it must be completed, and the estimated time it will take to complete. Sometimes you'll come across a problem that can be easily solved if you can properly prioritize your tasks. It is critical that you limit your choices to the bare minimum. If you don't properly prioritize your thoughts and actions, you won't be able to make the best decision. We sometimes have difficulty making decisions because we are afraid of what will happen if we do not make the best choice. We don't even consider what the worst-case scenario might be. Now, remind yourself to look back in time and see how everything turned out perfectly fine. You're fine today, so even if you made the wrong decision, it all worked out in the end. After that, use examples to aid your decision-making. If you're really stuck, Google your question, because it's likely that someone else has faced the same problem. Many people use user-based tools like Yahoo Answers, Reddit, and Quora to share their struggles online. If you ever need more information on a topic, you can get multiple responses. The best decisions will be made when everything is planned out, which you won't be able to do if you don't plan properly in the first place. To make the best decision, we sometimes need to make sure we prepare ahead of time rather than waiting until we are confronted with a problem. How to spot the real problem. Looking at the real issue that needs to be addressed is one method for problem solving. We frequently seek out solutions that will assist us in quickly exiting a situation. You might prefer a quick fix or a simple solution that requires less effort. If you try to take shortcuts, however, you may end up hindering your ability to find a positive solution. The person making the decision may not want to admit that they were wrong. Someone refuses to accept responsibility for the outcome, whether it's a spouse, a boss, or someone else. What can you do to assist in getting to the bottom of the problem? How can you come up with a solution without offending them or proving them wrong in the first place? It's critical to teach your brain to go straight to the core. Go over the usual who, what, where, when, and why questions. Dig deeper and apply your critical thinking skills to uncover the real issue lurking beneath it all. Consider the last time you were in a fight with two friends. They may have fought over something minor. One of them may have been rude to the other, or there may have been a misunderstanding. Maybe it's not a big deal between two average people, but these friends may have exaggerated the situation. Part of this is due to the fact that there was most likely a deeper issue lurking beneath the surface, making everyone feel even worse than it was. To begin, determine what the problem is at face value. What is your most fundamental understanding of the issue? Someone in our example is attempting to lose weight. Someone else might be able to help you with this issue. Discuss it with others to get a different perspective. In this case, the person who wants to lose weight might consult a doctor, a nutritionist, or even someone who has gone through similar difficulties. Examine all of the factors that may have contributed to or influenced this problem. This is when your thoughts become more in-depth. They are having difficulty in this case because they are anxious. Their mother chastised them for not losing weight. Food is a source of comfort for them. It is difficult for them to exercise. Come up with a variety of options. Because you can see the many different causes at this point, you can come up with a variety of solutions. In this case, you might seek professional help to overcome anxiety so that they can stop emotional eating and work through issues with their mother. A more effective exercise routine can also be presented. Select the most appropriate solution. This would vary by person, but as you can see, the solutions we came up with aren't as simple as find a new diet plan, because that won't solve the root of the problem. Make a decision about whether or not this was the right thing to do. Following this analysis and the selection of a solution, it's time to put the strategy into action. A person who is trying to lose weight can consult with a therapist and enroll in a yoga class. Fix and prepare whatever else is required for this procedure. This is the time to think about what you've done and whether you've taken the best course of action. If you're losing weight, you've found the right solution. If you're not losing weight, it's time to dig deeper or try a different approach. How to apply reasoning, judgment, analysis, and learning to your advantage. We all want to find a way to make the situation we're in better. When we do this, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we have other options. Remember to begin with logic. Don't look at things through your own eyes. Consider all options on an equal footing. After that, you can make decisions. These assessments should be unbiased, but they can also be subjective. There are a few things you can do to improve your judgment. Make a point of recognizing your past flaws in order to glean useful information that will prevent you from making the same mistakes again. You must also be aware of any biases you may have. This includes things like your level of optimism versus pessimism. How much do you admire a person, a place, or an idea? Your expectation of an event, based on the likelihood that it has occurred previously. The ability to notice small details as well as larger concepts. Make an assessment. Did you get it right? Were you mistaken? What needs to be tweaked? Here are the steps to conducting a proper analysis. Break it down into sections and work on one area at a time. Make a goal for the information you want to obtain. Collect all of the necessary information. To achieve the desired results, make judgments and correct the process. Finally, you will take away from this experience something you have learned. Even in the most difficult situations, you will be able to extract something useful. You have to research, practice, and repeat over and over to improve your ability to do all these things. It is necessary for you to practice on your own. Chapter 5. How to get better at decision-making. You must be able to make difficult decisions on a regular basis in order to solve difficult problems. This chapter contains advice to assist you in making decisions. It is an important aspect of critical thinking. The first steps to making better decisions. Stop procrastinating. Making a simple decision can be enjoyable, allowing you to complete a task and cross it off your daily to-do list. When faced with greater risks and the need to make a critical business or even personal decision, you may be tempted to postpone it because it is more difficult. However, you should resist this temptation if you want to be a great problem solver. Take your time. Rather than procrastinating, set aside time each day to consider the risks, potential outcomes, benefits, and drawbacks of the various options available to you. Avoiding it will not make it go away. Instead, it will increase your worry and anxiety while consuming valuable energy that could be spent coming up with new ideas. Face difficult decisions head on. When faced with a difficult decision, make a commitment to facing it head on and with courage. The earlier you establish this habit, the easier it will be to maintain it in the future. You'll be grateful to yourself later for taking the time to learn this skill. Put your emotions and ego aside. When you become too personally invested in how a decision will affect your feelings and how you are perceived by others, making decisions can become nearly impossible. Is it possible to solve the issue objectively? There is indeed. Simply make a list of your options and set aside your ego and emotions for the time being. Consider a situation in your business where you don't have enough revenue to meet your objectives or stay afloat. Is it better to concentrate on what will go wrong and how foolish it will appear if it fails, or on the causes of what has gone wrong? In that situation, you might ask yourself the following questions. Is there a problem with positioning that you're not aware of? Are you charging a fair price for your services? Do you know what you're doing when it comes to marketing? What are your options for resolving these issues? When you look at the facts, rather than your insecurities or fears, you will always make more logical and beneficial decisions. If someone needs assistance with their business, they have a lot of options if they stay calm and look for the right sources. Self-awareness is what distinguishes a truly successful business person. Get professional insight. Whatever decision you're making, it's likely that someone else has made it before you. Even if you believe your problem is unique, chances are it has already been solved by someone else. Fortunately, the majority of successful people are approachable and willing to assist those who approach them politely. To find an expert willing to help you with your problem, do some research on influential people in the field and ask 3 of them for advice. Give them the situation's facts, your thoughts, and the options you're considering. To be objective in making your decision, you may find it helpful to consult a neutral outside source. While it is worthwhile to do things on your own in some cases, there's nothing wrong with seeking advice from time to time. What you discover should be questioned. No one has all of the information they need to make an informed decision. Parts are constantly missing. Nonetheless, it is your responsibility to find the most accurate information possible. Listening to what your friend says without considering other sources, for example, can get you into trouble. Use quantitative and qualitative data instead. Relevant sources. When looking for important data, it's always a good idea to look for sources that are relevant. Customer feedback, for example, can help you find answers to questions about how to improve your business. No data is better than bad data. You can make strategic business decisions using industry trends, reports, and research, as well as expert advice. Above all, keep in mind that no data is preferable to bad data. When making important decisions, always look for data you can trust, and your decision-making abilities will soar. Be prepared for the worst. Another important aspect of good decision-making is being aware of any potential risks associated with your final choices. In an ideal world, you would be ready for the worst-case scenario. Consider the following options. Take some time to think about what the worst-case scenario might be in relation to your decision. What, for example, if you have to fire someone from your company, could lead to the worst-case scenario? The employee may file a lawsuit, or your team may become enraged. There are a plethora of approaches to dealing with any potential risk, but you must be prepared. Feel better about your decision. Having a realistic view of your potential risks can help you feel better about your choices. Always remember that people make mistakes, so don't get too down on yourself if you make a poor decision. Instead, consider what went wrong and then write about it in order to prevent it from happening again. In this way, your blunder will not be in vain. The consequences of poor decision-making and problem-solving. Take a look at a typical business scenario. You are comfortable conducting interviews and selecting the best candidate for a position. You're confident in your ability to delegate and explain what your company is all about, as well as how employees should act in order to contribute. You believe you have effectively provided them with all of the tools they require to be successful on the job. So, why do they struggle to make even minor decisions? Your employees' apparent inability to make good decisions may begin to distract you. Nothing can be accomplished unless decisions are made. Conclusion. Congratulations on reaching this point in the book. It was written to give the listener an overview of the critical thinking process in order to pique their interest in a practice that can greatly benefit people as they strive to live a more productive and happy life. You will eventually be able to rely on your own logic and reasoning in any situation, no matter how difficult or challenging. You will be able to succeed both at work and in your personal life as a result of this. Make use of all of the strategies you've learned in this book. You've learned to think like a lawyer, and now you're ready to solve problems professionally. You can improve your productivity and efficiency by following the simple tips provided in this book. Critical thinking is a powerful tool when it is properly understood and practiced. When it comes to developing critical thinking skills, it's crucial to learn more about the event and the mechanisms that play a role in it. Concerns about the successful application of critical thinking skills are likely to fade once they are recognized. Critical thinking can transform the reasoning process into clear, compelling, and truthful language that has been carefully crafted. Experiences and responses can be turned into theories, thoughts, observations, conclusions, inferences, hypotheses, questions, opinions, premises, and logical arguments all at the same time. There are a lot of misconceptions about critical thinking that keep people from actively learning how to improve it. You should be confident in your ability to stand firm in the decision you are about to make if you have gone through the proper process of understanding the problem, examining all options, gathering information for solutions, and evaluating everything. By going through this process, you are putting your critical thinking skills to the test. It may seem unconventional at first, just like other things you do for the first time, but as you practice these techniques, your critical thinking skills will improve and evolve. Critical thinking is necessary for analyzing information and reaching clear and sound conclusions about any argument or problem solution. It necessitates going through a process that includes looking at the evidence and making decisions about whatever you're thinking. As important as critical thinking is, you must avoid intellectual arrogance, failure to listen, and hasty judgment, or your entire argument for critical thinking will crumble as quickly as it began. There are a variety of situations in which critical thinking can be applied. Looking back, you were most likely in a critical thinking situation without even realizing it. It's important to remember, though, that the effectiveness of your critical thinking skills is determined by how you use them. Above all, critical thinking is a mental state that not everyone possesses naturally. Although schools attempt to teach critical thinking, consistent practice is required to train your brain to think critically at all times. You should strive to be the best thinker you can be in everything you do. You'll be able to face any situation head-on and solve problems with precision and efficiency if you improve your critical thinking skills. Critical thinking is required no matter where you are, whether at work, school, or in everyday situations. Despite the numerous techniques and skills associated with critical thinking, practicing is the best thing you can do for yourself. Practice every critical thinking strategy. Adopt all the strategies of a good thinker and keep a close eye on yourself to make sure you're not doing anything that will sabotage your critical thinking. If you enjoyed this audiobook and you've learned more about how to develop your critical thinking, an honest review is always appreciated and will help me reach new listeners just like you who'd like to think clearly in their everyday life. Good luck on your journey. Harrison Walton.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.